A hidden staircase in a French church leads down to a 400-year-old burial vault stacked with centuries of corpses. Beneath the ruins of a 1500-year-old Istanbul church, secret passages open onto 2 sealed rooms carved for mysterious rituals. And in Turkey, a forgotten 5th century church warns visitors that only the righteous may enter, a message hidden for over 800 years. During restoration work at Saint Philibert Church in Dijon, France, workers came across something pretty freaky. Hidden behind a wall was a staircase no one had seen in hundreds of years, and it led straight down to a burial vault sealed for around 400 years. Lead archaeologist Vincent Dumas explained that inside they found wooden coffins with the remains of adults and children, and because space was limited, the, quote, bones of each individual were pushed to the sides to make room for the last deceased. The vault goes back to the 15th or 16th century, but beneath the church floor they dug up even older burials. There were slab tombs from the 11th to 13th centuries, and even deeper, they found sarcophagi from the 6th to 8th centuries. Dumas said these layers prove that each church was built on the remains of the previous one, showing almost 1,000 years of people burying their dead in the same spot. And all of this started because they were doing simple restoration work. Nuts. An Istanbul archaeologist recently came across something really cool under the ruins of the 1500-year-old St. Polyectus Church. While digging, they found a hidden underground passage that connects to 2 sealed-off rooms. Nobody even knew they were down there, but the layout seems to suggest they were part of the church, possibly used in rituals that happened back when the city was still called Constantinople. The passage and rooms aren't just bare stone, they're nicely carved and decorated, so this probably wasn't just, some random storage area. The church was originally built between 524 and 527 by Princess Anicia Juliana, who was basically trying to one-up Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodora by flexing her own wealth and power. Even in ruins, the place still makes a statement. What's crazy is how much of it survived earthquakes. Mahir Polat, Deputy Secretary General of Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, said, Istanbul, which is currently struggling with earthquakes, has experienced dozens of earthquakes over the past 1,500 years. However, the structure we're seeing now has managed to survive all of them. We should learn lessons from this. In Turkey, archaeologists were working at the ruins of the ancient city of Olympus when they came across a 5th century Christian church that hadn't been seen in over 1,000 years. At the entrance, they found an inscription that had been buried and ignored for centuries. Translated, it reads, "Only those on the righteous path may enter here." So it was a warning. Only people who followed the church rules could go inside. The floor of the church is covered in mosaics with leaves, vines, and other plant designs, and some have the names of the people who paid for them. They also found big storage jars and a building that looks like a temple, along with layers of Roman, Byzantine, and Hellenistic architecture. So this city was in use for a long time. Olympus was abandoned by the 12th century, so this message hasn't been seen in over 800 years. It's a simple phrase, but it does kind of tell you a lot about the city. People here cared about rules, their faith, and showed off their wealth with fancy church art. In eastern Finland, churches were hiding something I thought I read wrong at first. Frog coffins. And yes, these were tiny coffins with frogs inside them. They were part of folk magic. Some churches had dozens, some even more. Archaeologists dug into one church and found about 32. According to records from the time, the coffins were pushed through ventilation hatches or buried under stone foundations. The coffins are about 15 centimeters long and would have a frog wrapped in fishing net, sometimes impaled with a needle and thread. One report says a frog's mouth was even stitched shut. Now, I mentioned folk magic before, but what was the specific point of this? Well, it was to either mess with someone's luck or protect against bad magic. One old healer described the ritual in detail. Catch a reddish frog without touching it with bare hands. Put it on its back in a tiny coffin. Bind its legs, nail the lid through the frog's heart, and then carry it around the cowshed while chanting. The ritual could also include cow hair or pieces of the person's clothing. depending on whether it was meant to heal, curse, or protect. Next on the list we have St. Oliver Plunkett's head. A lot of heads on this list, which makes sense, it is everyone's most recognizable feature. The head is currently displayed in St. Peter's Church in Ireland. St. Oliver Plunkett is an important figure in Irish and Catholic history. Born in 1625, he became the head of the Catholic Church in Ireland. At the time, Catholics in Ireland were heavily persecuted by the English government, and Plunkett worked hard to support and reorganize the church. But because of this, Plunkett also became a target. In 1679, during a period of anti-Catholic hysteria, he was falsely accused of planning to bring French soldiers into Ireland to start a rebellion. He was arrested and taken to London for trial. He was found guilty of high treason. You could say he had a target on his head. On July 1st of 1681, Oliver Plunkett was executed in London. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered. The story goes that his head was then brought to Rome and then hidden in a nunnery that was led by Plunkett's grandniece, where it remained until 1921.
Okay, so while this next one is not a body part that was preserved by the Catholic Church themselves, it's parts of a body that were kept by a member of the Catholic Church, and it's disturbing, so it definitely belongs on this list. Around 1830, Saint Leduina was born in Schiedam, Holland, and 16 years later, the same woman fell while ice skating and developed the strangest condition. She was mostly paralyzed, sensitive to the light, and in constant chronic pain, and as a result she spent the rest of her life primarily bedridden, only able to move her right arm. Eventually she developed a skin condition which caused her flesh to fall right off of her body. Now here's where things get weird. Well, weirder. For some strange reason, these chunks of flesh smelled incredibly sweet, and so her parents gathered them all up and put them in a vase. I mean, personally, I'll stick to flowers, but you do you. Now you'd probably think Leduina would be pretty pissed off at the world, what with this being her existence and all, but no. In fact, she considered her suffering to be a gift from God, and pretty soon she had a pretty substantial following. One man even paid to have water she had washed her hands in brought all the way to England, and lo and behold, it solved his leg problem when he drank it or bathed in it or whatever. Another woman had a vision that Leduina's breasts had filled with milk, although she was not pregnant nor had she ever been a mother, but sure enough, Leduina provided her with milk, which the woman happily drank 3 times. Gross.
Next up we have St. Clare's nails and hair, which I find kind of the grossest. Hands, tongues, heads, I mean that's all fine, but fingernails and hair clippings? That just feels like some serial killer style collecting right there. And the hair was collected by one of her followers, who I gotta imagine sat up late at night sniffing it. You see, St. Clare was known for having long, luscious locks, but in 1212, wanting to rid herself of anything that could be seen as vain in the eyes of the Lord, she had her hair cut off, but it was then collected by an unknown follower. The hair is currently housed in the Basilica of St. Clare in Assisi, Italy. Along with the hair, there's also a small shrine containing some of her fingernail clippings.
Alright, next up we have the Virgin Mary's breast milk. Oh god, here we go again. During the Byzantine era, the site of what is now known as the Chapel of the Milk Grotto, located in Bethlehem in the Palestinian territories, was a center of Christian pilgrimage. This center is also where it is believed that the Virgin Mary gave birth to the Son of God. You may know him, his name is Jesus Christ. Well, according to legend, while breastfeeding her son, some of the Virgin Mary's milk supposedly dropped onto the floor, and it turned the stone on the floor white. Fast forward to 1872, and the Chapel of the Milk Grotto was built in the very spot. Now, I bet right about now you're assuming that you can visit this spot, the site of the Great Milk Drop, and see the stone guarded by velvet ropes and highly trained security guards. Well, you can't, because instead of preserving the ancient relic, the grotto decided to do something else with it. Any guesses? If you said find a way to mass produce and sell the stone, you'd be correct. That's right, the site sells limestone powder made from the grotto's ground up milk stained stone for just $2 a pack. As a keepsake? No, that's silly, there's no return customers in keepsakes. It's sold as a cure, meant to be dissolved into a drink and consumed by anyone suffering from any ailment. The third class relic truly is a miracle.
And lastly, we have St. Francis Xavier's arm. The presentation here is nice, but it's still a 472-year-old severed arm, so it's pretty gnarly. Turns out Lucio Fulci zombie movies are pretty accurate about what decomposing corpses look like. The arm toured across churches in Canada a few years back, giving the Canucks a chance to see an arm that was said to have baptized over 100,000 people up close for the first time. Xavier died in 1552, and the majority of his body is in India. It's only left the Vatican a handful of times, so this was a big deal for people that didn't want to spend an arm and a leg traveling all the way to Europe to see it. This photo was taken inside another church in England, Septan Church, just outside of Liverpool. Supposedly what you're looking at is a figure the photographer hadn't seen when he first snapped the picture in 1999. Brad Steiger had been inside the church with only one other person, another photographer standing right next to him. So, who is the mysterious figure in the photo? Many have called it the Septan Church ghost. Some think it could be the spirit of a former priest who still haunts the place, lingering within its walls. Some locals think this ghost is the same one that haunts the nearby Punch Bowl pub, sometimes referred to as the creepiest 100 yards on Maryside. Ghostly sightings have been reported there for years, and looking at Septan Church, let's just say I'm not surprised some people think it's haunted. What you're looking at here is a rather notorious photograph taken inside Warstead St. Mary Church in Norfolk, England, 1975. There's something pretty odd about this one, isn't there? Yeah, the ghostly looking thing sitting behind the woman. There's a whole story behind this photo, too. A man named Peter Berthold had been visiting the church with his family, and during their visit, he snapped this photo of his wife Diane, who was sitting on a church bench with her head bowed in prayer. At the time, Peter claimed that there was nobody behind her when he took the shot. Then months later, while showing their photos to friends, someone pointed out the strange figure sitting behind Diane. As they all squinted at the projector, they realized that they were looking at a ghostly white figure, almost resembling a woman wearing a bonnet. According to Diane, when they saw the white figure sitting behind her, they just stood there with their mouths open, intrigued and a bit spooked. Peter and Diane returned to the church to share their discovery with the vicar, and he told them about the legend of the White Lady, a ghost who supposedly appears to those in need of healing. And coincidentally, at the time the photo was taken, Diane was struggling with health issues and was on antibiotics. Next up, we have the historic St. Boto Church in London. See if you can spot anything strange in this image. Look closely at the top right-hand corner. In 1982, a photographer named Chris Brackley was exploring the church with his wife when he snapped a picture inside. At the time, it was just the two of them, so you can imagine their shock when the developed photo revealed a ghostly-looking figure in old-fashioned clothing standing on the balcony near the altar. When Chris examined the negative, experts confirmed there was no double exposure and that his camera was functioning perfectly. So someone must have been there at the moment the picture was taken, right? But Chris was positive he and his wife had been the only ones there. Well, a few years later, a builder working on restoration in St. Boltoff's crypt reached out to Chris. While tearing down a wall, he'd accidentally disturbed a pile of old coffins, and to his surprise, one of them opened up to reveal a well-preserved body. What really got everyone's attention was the fact that the face of the body looked eerily similar to the ghostly figure in Chris's photograph. Notice anything strange about this photo? How about now? There it is. This photo was taken in 2015 by the then 29-year-old Carrie Launders, who, you guessed it, didn't notice the figure until reviewing the image later. But a little history about this very, very old church. Norwich Cathedral started construction in 1094 after the Norman invasion. With a place that old, it's really no surprise that it has a long history of rumored hauntings. One of the most famous ghost stories is the priest's ghost at the Erpingham Gate, one of the entrances to the cathedral. The first sighting of this supposed ghost was in 1736. The entity is believed to be that of Reverend Thomas Tunstall, a Catholic priest who was martyred at the cathedral. Tunstall went out in one of the most gruesome ways possible. He was drawn and quartered, and his remains were displayed around Norwich as a grim warning. So then we have the photo taken in 2015. Many who look at this image believe it could be the apparition of one of the bishops buried beneath the cathedral floors. This is St. George's Church in Likova, a small town in the Czech Republic. For nearly 50 years, this church sat abandoned after a tragic incident in 1968 during a funeral service. Just as the ceremony was underway, the ceiling and part of the roof collapsed, sending everyone scrambling outside in fear. And after that, locals took it as a bit of a bad omen and avoided the church entirely, leaving it to slowly crumble while they held services outdoors. The church didn't just fall into disrepair, it was also stripped of its valuables. During the communist regime, looters took away paintings, statues, the church bell, and even the clock tower, leaving behind a damaged organ and an empty shell of what it once was. Then in 2014, a professor from the University of West Bohemia gave his art students an interesting assignment. They were to find a suitable but dilapidated church for an art installation. One student, Jacob Hadrava, immediately thought of St. George's. Hadrava created over a dozen life-sized ghostly figures dressed in robes, placing them in the church's pews, transforming the abandoned church into a site that now attracts visitors from around the world. In Europe and even parts of North America and Australia, churches and old buildings have been found over the years hiding something kinda weird. Shoes, tiny worn shoes, shoved into chimneys, under floors, above ceilings, tucked around doors and windows. The oldest recorded one was behind the choir stalls in Winchester Cathedral, installed in 1308. Most of these shoes were used, about half belonged to kids. Archaeologist Brian Hoggard says the locations, quote, suggest that some may have been concealed as magical charms to protect the occupants of the building against evil influences such as demons, ghosts, and witches, end quote. Some may have also been meant to bless a woman with fertility or act as offerings to household spirits. A fun piece of folklore here, story goes that witches were drawn to the human scent of a shoe, and once inside they couldn't get out. Not exactly sure why that would have been the case, but basically the shoes were like little traps. Researchers have found hundreds of these hidden shoes over the years, and the tradition didn't die out until the 20th century. Even as late as 1964, a shoe was placed in the foundation of a factory for luck. In the town of Folkestone, England, a set of bones has been talked about for over 100 years. They were first dug up in 1885 inside the Church of St. Mary and St. Enswith, and people immediately wondered if they belonged to St. Enswith herself, a young nun who founded one of Britain's earliest monasteries around 660. For years, there wasn't a way to really know, but then in 2020, researchers used modern equipment to take a closer look. They found the bones were from a woman who died in her late teens or early 20s and seemed to have lived a pretty comfortable life. Radiocarbon dating placed her in the middle of the 7th century. Andrew Richardson from the Canterbury Archaeological Trust said that, yeah, it was probably Enswith. It makes sense. Enswith was a granddaughter of a king, so pretty comfortable life, and she died young. There are still some questions though. Why were her bones hidden in a wall instead of being put on display? Excavators think the answer might be the anti-Catholic Reformation. As the movement swept through England, relics considered objects of false worship were destroyed, so they might have been trying to hide the saint's remains from being torched, in a fire or something. In Hadstock, England, St. Botop's Church has a story. For years, people thought the large piece of skin nailed to its door belonged to a Viking raider who tried to loot the church. He was flayed alive as a warning to others. But recent research has totally changed that story. Cambridge scholar Rudy MacLeod and his team used a technique called zooms, which can figure out what species skin or bone comes from. And they found the skin wasn't actually human at all, sadly. At St. Botolph's and Westminster Abbey, it was cow skin, while St. Michael and All Angels Church had horse or donkey hide. Yeah, the whole Viking skin being used on church doors thing was not an isolated incident. But MacLeod said, quote, "In the absence of any samples actually proving to be human, it looks like this story might have originated for one of the churches as a local myth first and then spread to others quickly," end quote. The myth goes way back, but the truth is way less gruesome. It's still weird though. I mean, why even stretch a bunch of animal skin over a church door and say it was from a slain Viking? As MacLeod put it, the quote, morbid fascination associated with this myth likely explains its persistence, as well as serving as deterrent to would-be church desecrators. In Venice, inside the Basilica of St. Maria e San Donato, there's something you'd never expect to see in a church: the bones of a dragon. Or maybe you would, I don't know. I guess if there's anywhere dragon bones are going to be, I guess, an old church. The legend goes that these ribs belong to a fierce dragon that was killed by Saint Donatus, a 4th century saint whose story is almost entirely legendary. The bones didn't start out in Venice. They were taken from Cephalonia in the 1120s by the Venetian leader who took the dragon bones during one of his raids on Byzantine Greece. Alongside them came the saint's own remains. The legend says Donatus was a childhood friend of Julian the Apostate and performed a bunch of miracles before dying, including raising a woman from the dead, exorcising a demon, restoring sight to a blind woman, and finally killing the dragon that had poisoned a well. Quite a life. The so-called dragon bones are now hanging behind the altar, mostly out of sight unless you know where to look. The church doesn't even mention them on its markers. Of course, do scientists actually think they're dragon bones? No, but I do love this story. In 1866, workers doing repairs at St. Mary the Virgin in Northamptonshire came across something weird inside one of the church's pillars. They reached in and pulled out a crumbling basket, and inside that basket was a mummified human heart. Word of the find spread through the nearby village of Woodford. Some said it was the heart of a monk who haunted the church at night. Others thought it belonged to a crusader who died far from home, but whose friends had somehow managed to bring his heart all the way back to England. There's a slightly more solid lead in a document from 1280 though, which says the heart might have belonged to a local noble, Roger de Kirkton. He died in Norfolk, but apparently his heart was entombed in his home church at Woodford. No one knows for sure though. Even today, you can see the delicate mummified heart in its original spot inside the pillar, now behind glass. In Rome, the Dominican monastery keeps what's claimed to be the right arm and hand of Saint Mary Magdalene. Supposedly, it's the very arm she used to anoint Jesus' feet, which is why it's treated as especially sacred. The relic is displayed in a glass and gold container shaped like an arm, only comes out on occasion for display. This isn't the only part of Mary Magdalene that churches claim to have. Her skull is in France, various bones, hair, and a tooth are sitting in churches across Europe. The arm in Rome is probably the most famous one, that people have been coming to look at it for centuries. Does anyone really know if it's hers? Not really. There's no trail from her 1st century burial to this monastery. Most likely it showed up in the Middle Ages when churches were desperate for holy relics to boost their status. Still, the church treats it like the real thing, and thousands of pilgrims over the years have come to see it.
We're just gonna get right down to the nitty-gritty here, because the first disturbing body part preserved by the Catholic Church that I would love to talk about is Jesus's prepuce, aka his foreskin. We warned you this list would be disturbing. You see, because Jesus was born Jewish, he underwent circumcision at a very young age, and because Jesus was born Jesus, this was a big deal. For relic hunters, that is, who believed that the removal of Jesus's prepuce, as they call it, meant that it did not ascend to heaven with the rest of his body, as it is said in the Bible that Jesus went up body and soul into heaven in the sight of his apostles. But let's get back to the bits. Or bit, which was regarded by the Catholic Church as a holy item. The holy foreskin, if you will. I didn't come up with that. That's actually what they called it. Throughout the years, dozens of churches have claimed to have been in possession of the prepuce, the majority of which are located in France. In 800 AD, it is said that the prepuce became a gift for Pope Leo III, who was living in Rome at the time, but in the 16th century, it was moved to Calcutta. Other foreskins have been brought to the Pope in the hopes of being authenticated, but the Vatican did its best to not entertain that type of behavior. The prepuces that were authenticated by the church, however, were celebrated, and one was even seen bleeding when it was worshipped during a mass. Today it is believed that all holy bits and bobs have been lost, and in 1900 Pope Leo XIII ruled that anyone who referenced the piece would be excommunicated from the church. Like, that's cool and all, but I just want to know where the hell people were getting all of these prepuces.
Next we have the head of St. John Baptist, which is housed in Amiens Cathedral in France. It's also on display in the Basilica of St. Sylvester I in Rome. Oh, and the German Museum in Munich also claims they have St. John's head, and there's one on display in Syria as well. St. John wasn't known to have 4 heads though, so who has the real one? Well, the one in France has the most ornate presentation. I mean, just look at this thing. That is quite a beautiful way to display a head. The story behind this relic is that it was brought back from Constantinople in 1206 by a crusader named Wallen de Sartine. The Amiens Cathedral was also constructed for the sole purpose of housing St. John the Baptist relics, so I'm gonna guess this is the true head. The ones in Germany and Syria are also covered up by cloth, so who really knows what's under there. And the one in Italy is theorized to have belonged to a local martyr who was just also named St. John.
Next up, if you were a bit disappointed by just the tip, you should be happy to know that it is also believed that the church kept Jesus' umbilical cord as well. The umbilical cord was said to be kept in the Lateran Palace in Rome in a chapel known as the Sancta Sanctorum, the place of holy things. This is where many of Christianity's most important relics were once stored. To access the chapel would require a person to climb the Scala Santa, the holy steps that Jesus himself was believed to descend from to attend his trial with Pontius Pilate, during which Jesus was crucified. There are 28 marble steps leading up to the chapel, which contains a list of relics that were kept there during the 11th century. While some relics were kept sealed in wooden chests and in altars, others were on full display to those who wished to view them. And of course, one of these items just so happened to be the umbilical cord of Jesus Christ himself, which hung inside of a cross made from the purest gold, adorned with the finest gems. Also said to be hung inside the cross, you know, not much, just the holy tip.
Next up we have St. Anthony's tongue and jaw. These are 2 intricately detailed, beautifully ornate pieces, but housed inside is St. Anthony's jaw, and in the other is his tongue, which is pretty awesome. That's how I'll be displaying all my tongues and jaws from now on, or at least that's what I wish I could do. For now, it'll just have to sit in my crappy repurposed jam jars and my wooden shelf from IKEA. The story goes that St. Anthony's body was exhumed over 3 decades after his death, but yet somehow his tongue hadn't decomposed, and this was perfect because he'd been remembered for all his enthralling sermons. So they removed the tongue, and John decided to house them at the Basilica of St. Anthony in Padua.
Alright, next up we have the severed head of St. Catherine of Siena, a prime example of how proper skincare and meticulous post-mortuary preservation can keep a woman looking young for centuries. I mean, she's clearly dead, but there's not a wrinkle in sight. St. Catherine of Siena was born on March 25th of 1347 and died on April 29th of 1380 at the age of 33. She was a Christ figure, best known for the fact that she experienced stigmata, the appearance of bodily wounds in locations that correspond with the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ. She also experienced mystical visions throughout her life, and although she died young of natural causes, she was deemed a martyr, a person killed because of their religious beliefs, because of what people considered to be her holy wounds. She died near her convent in Rome, but her head was later stolen and brought back to Siena, the birthplace of St. Catherine, after her death. It is said, and this is legend, so bear with me, that the men who stole it were captured by Roman guards, but before they could be tried, St. Catherine's remains turned into hundreds of rose petals. The thieves who had stolen her head with good intentions began making their way back to Siena, only to have the head reappear in their satchel as though it had.
One of Ireland's most haunted castles is Leap Castle, and one of the most haunted parts of the ruins is said to be the chapel. Built around 1250, it was the stronghold of the O'Carroll clan, but the castle is infamous for a horrific event that took place in 1532 in the chapel during a mass. One-eyed T. Joe Carroll stormed in chanting holy rites and fatally struck his older brother, Father Thaddeus, with a sword. Thaddeus collapsed onto the altar where he let out his final breath, and it's said that the ghost of the priest still haunts the chapel to this day. Witnesses have reported seeing the chapel's windows light up late at night, even since the castles lay in ruins. In 1922, while workers were restoring the castle, they came across a dungeon hidden behind a wall in the chapel. Inside, they found a gruesome collection of human skeletons impaled on wooden spikes. This was where the prisoners would have been left to die in agony. Another notorious incident involved the McMahon clan, mercenaries hired by the O'Carrolls. After a feast celebrating a victory, the O'Carrolls poisoned the McMahon men to avoid paying them, and their spirits are said to wander the castle too, still seeking revenge. The castle eventually passed on to the Darby family in the 1600s. Mildred Darby dabbled in the occult in the early 1900s, and it's said that she accidentally unleashed a spirit described as thin, gaunt, and shadowy with a horrible smell. St. Mary's Church in Ackenham, Suffolk, is a historic Anglican church with roots dating back to the late 13th century. The building features a tower from the 14th century and a south chapel added in the 16th century. Over the years, it's gone through a number of restorations, including a big one in the mid-19th century. During World War II, it suffered damage from a German bomb, but was restored in the 60s with help from the Friends of Friendless Churches, bringing it back to its former glory. From the outside, St. Mary's looks like a typical rural parish church, complete with its medieval architecture and picturesque setting, but it's said that beneath the quaint exterior lies something darker. According to folklore, it's the devil himself that's said to sleep beneath the church, resting under a broken tombstone known as the Devil's Grave. It's also said that if you walk around the church counterclockwise 13 times, you could awaken the slumbering devil. St. Bartholomew the Great Church, often just called St. Bart's, is a historic church in West Smithfield, London, with its construction beginning way back in 1120. A monk named Rahiri secured the land and funds from King Henry I to build the place, and over the centuries, St. Bart's has witnessed a lot of dark history, including numerous killings and executions right on its grounds. Today, St. Bart's is not just a beautiful place of worship, and it really is. I mean, look at these images. It's just incredible. This is the church I'd want to go to. Just medieval looking and just filled with detail. Awesome. It's also a hotspot for ghostly activity though, and it certainly looks like it. Among the many spirits said to haunt the church, you might encounter the Duke of Argyll, the painter William Hogarth, and even a mysterious priest. Visitors have reported seeing a strange white mist that forms in the center aisle, sometimes taking the shape of a woman. There's also a darker black mist believed to represent the residual negative energy from the violence that has occurred there over the centuries. One of the most famous apparitions is said to be Rahiri himself. Legend has it that his ghost wanders the church searching for his missing foot, which was supposedly stolen from his crypt long after he passed away. If you happen to be in the church on July 1st at 7 a.m., you might just catch a glimpse of him, appearing as he does on that day every year. This image here was captured in St. Nicholas Church in Pluckley. Pluckley, a small town in Kent, is known as one of Britain's most haunted towns, so it makes sense that its church is also said to be haunted. The town itself is said to be haunted by 12 different spirits. One of the most famous is the spectral coach and horses that are said to ride through the area. Another well-known apparition is the Red Lady, who haunts the churchyard of St. Nicholas Church. This church dates back to the 13th century and features the Daring family chapel, and the Red Lady, believed to be a member of the Daring family, is often spotted wandering the grounds. You also have a ghost named the White Lady, also a member of the family. She died young and was buried in a beautiful white gown, and on misty nights she can be seen floating around the grounds or kneeling in the chapel. Aside from the church though, another one of the village's most haunted spots is the Screaming Wood, where locals say you can hear eerie, blood-curdling screams echoing from deep within the forest. Newbie Church in North Yorkshire has become pretty famous for this photo right here. It's become known as the Spectre of Newbie Church or the Newbie Monk. The photograph was taken in 1963 at the Church of Christ the Consoler on the grounds of Newbie Hall. The photo was snapped by Reverend Kenneth F. Lord during a visit to the church. In the image, the spectral figure appears to resemble someone draped in a dark shroud and a white face covering. Some think this could be the spirit of a monk, with the face covering having having been used to mask leprosy or some other disfigurement. When the photo first came out, people were also quick to point out how tall this figure looked, but skeptics pointed out that the figure's feet aren't showing, so it could just be standing on a box or something to create that illusion of height. Apparently, photographic experts who've analyzed the image have also said that it doesn't appear to be the result of double exposure, so who knows. Built centuries ago and abandoned in the 1840s, St. Mary's Church in Clophill is considered one of the darkest and most cursed churches in all of England. In 1963, two teens were exploring the grounds when they noticed an old grave had been dug up. The bones inside had been used to form a pentagram. A skull had also been jammed into a broken window. Bones were laid out to form a circle, and there were feathers and red crosses on the walls. Police confirmed that the coffin belonged to a woman named Jenny Humberstone, buried in 1770. And suddenly, everyone was panicking about devil worshippers, and not long after, people started talking about how they'd see hooded figures performing strange ceremonies at night. Some say the church was cursed from the beginning, though. Unlike most Christian churches, this one wasn't built facing east toward Jerusalem. Instead, it faces the opposite direction, what some people call the Devil's Path. Whether that means anything or not, people still report strange lights, chanting, and shadow figures moving among the graves. The Sedlec Ossuary in the Czech Republic is full of human bones. Beneath a 14th century Gothic church, the basement holds between 40,000 and 70,000 skeletons. And it's beautiful, just in a morbid kind of way. They're all arranged into stacks. There are skulls on chains, chalices, and the showstopper, a chandelier made from every bone in the human body. František Rint, a Czech woodcarver, got the commission in 1870. To transform piles of bones into eerie art. Legend says a half-blind monk originally stacked the bones in the 1500s and miraculously regained his sight afterward. But Rint, of course, took it to a whole other level, and the result is amazing. It's not evil, it's a memento mori, a reminder that we're all dust. Again, pretty morbid, but that is what it is, unfortunately. Some described feeling small under the thousands of skulls staring back at them. It must feel heavy, to put it lightly. Around 200,000 people visit this place every year, and I think you can count me in. I'd love to see this in person. This next one might be one of the creepiest churches you'll ever step foot in, the Chene Chapel in Poland. It looks like a normal little church from the outside, but walk in and the walls are made entirely out of human bones. There are about 3,000 human skulls packed into the chapel and another 21,000 skeletons buried in the crypt underneath. The guy responsible was a priest named Václav Tomasek. Between 1776 and 1784, he and a couple gravediggers started collecting bones from nearby mass graves, mostly victims of war, famine, and plagues, and they spent over a decade arranging them into walls and ceilings. But it's not just nameless people here. There's supposedly a giant's skull sitting on the altar, plus a mayor, a priest, and even Tomasek himself. His skull was added after he died, right in the center near the altar. Beneath the monastery in Palermo, Italy, there is a massive underground burial site known as the Capuchin Catacombs. It all began in the late 1500s when a group of Capuchin monks exhumed a fellow friar and found his body had been naturally mummified. They took it as a sign from God, and instead of burying their dead, they started preserving them. At first, it was just monks, but over the years, wealthy people paid to have their bodies embalmed and displayed in the crypt as well, dressed in their Sunday best and mounted to the walls. There are over 8,000 corpses down there, just lining the halls. Some of them still have skin, others still have hair. One of the most famous is Rosalia Lombardo, a young girl who died in 1920. Her body was embalmed so well that people still claim that her eyes open and close on their own. Her glass coffin is one of the first things you see when you walk in. Some say it looks like she's sleeping. Most people don't say the catacombs are haunted, but a lot of visitors describe a really heavy feeling when they're inside. No shit. St. Michan's Church in Dublin is one of the city's oldest, and it's known for one thing: its crypts. Underneath the church are a series of burial vaults where bodies have been naturally mummified, thanks to the dry air and limestone walls, and some of the mummies are over 800 years old. One of the most famous is known as the Crusader, a 6'5" man with broken legs, and supposedly they were snapped just so they could fit him in the coffin. There's also a nun, a thief, and a bunch of others with no names. But this place hasn't been treated with much respect. In 2019, vandals broke into the crypts, pulled open coffins, and they stole a head. The church claimed that they'd played football with the skulls. That's soccer for all us non-European folk. Then in 2024, the entire crypt caught fire. Apparently it was arson. At least 5 mummies were destroyed, including the Crusader. His remains were so badly damaged they couldn't be restored and had to be reburied somewhere else. I'm not sure what everyone's problem is with this place, but with all the tomfoolery, some say the crypt feels different now, like something's angry. Wonder why. England's ancient Ram Inn was originally a church. It was built around 1140, but it was built on ground with a very dark history. Before the church, the site was a pagan burial ground. Over time, bones and skulls were dug up, showing signs they'd been ritually killed. There was also a witch burned at the stake here, so it's no surprise the place has become known for its ghosts once it became an inn. In the 60s and 70s, paranormal investigators visited and came back with stories of ghostly children's voices, hearing eerie laughter, not to mention all the stories of demonic figures, succubi and incubi, harassing people who stayed overnight. In 1968, owner John Humphreys had some crazy stories of his own that he came out with, like the time he was dragged feet first from his bed. There are said to be around 20 spirits haunting the inn. Snagov Monastery sits on a small island in Snagov Lake, about 40 kilometers north of Bucharest. Built in the 14th century, it looks peaceful enough, but can you guess who's buried here? How about the real-life Dracula? Yeah, legend says Vlad the Impaler is buried somewhere beneath the church. No one knows exactly where, but it's said if you step on his grave, you'll carry his curse. Kinda sucks you don't know where it is. There are stories of visitors suddenly falling ill and accidents happening to people who disrespect the place. Back in the 60s, a group of treasure hunters tried to dig under the church, searching for Vlad's remains. They were stopped by locals who said the ground was cursed. Honestly, I'm surprised more people haven't tried to dig him up. I mean, finding Dracula's remains? I'd risk the curse. I mean, how freaking cool would that be? Carta Monastery was built in 1204 by Cistercian monks in the Romanian countryside. It was a quiet, almost forgotten place until people started hearing things. During renovations in the late 20th century, workers discovered that there were 2 human skeletons buried in the cellar. Now, that's not too unusual for medieval monasteries, but some say the bones aren't the only thing lurking there. I mean, if you're ever in search of a creepy church set for your horror movie, this is it. Literally, The Nun was filmed here. You can see why. The place just looks, it's got that vibe to it. Now, supposedly the place is haunted by cloaked figures who are seen wandering the grounds at night. Some say these are the spirits of monks who never left the monastery after death, trapped between worlds. Others think something darker resides here. Apparently, poltergeist-type activity's been going on ever since those 2 skeletons were discovered in the cellar. Stall Cemetery in Kansas sits behind a small church ruin in the town of Stall, about halfway between Topeka and Lawrence. The church was built in the 1860s and abandoned in the 1920s. What's left of it is just crumbling stone walls and a few grave markers. This place is famous for a wild story though. Supposedly it's one of these 7 gates to hell. Twice a year, one on Halloween and the other on the spring equinox, it's said that the devil himself appears in the cemetery and walks through the ruined church. Some say if you count the steps leading down into the church's basement, you'll never get the same number twice. Others claim they've heard growling, cloven-hooved footsteps, or seen dark figures watching from the trees. Even celebrities have bought into it. Ariana Grande once said she tried to visit but got overwhelmed and left after something whispered in her ear. And one of the popes refused to visit the place, saying it was just too evil. St. John the Baptist Church in Vaser Brun, Germany, sits on top of some very violent history. It was built on the site of an older monastery that was destroyed in 955 by Hungarian raiders. During that attack, nearly every monk was killed on the grounds. Some were burned alive, others were executed in their cells, and it's said that the spirits of those monks never left. People visiting the church today will report strange cold spots and the sound of chanting echoing through the halls, even when the place is empty. The monastery ruins are still partially visible beneath the newer church, and some have said they've seen glowing lights around the old stones at night. One visitor claimed to see a full apparition of a monk silently walking down a hallway before vanishing through a wall. Another said they'd heard Latin prayers being whispered near the altar when they were completely alone. The church is still active, which makes the paranormal stuff even weirder and more numerous, because people go in for mass and they come out saying they saw something move behind the pulpit or that they felt hands on their back while kneeling in prayer. That's why this place has earned a reputation as one of Germany's most haunted churches.
The Church of Transfiguration. This church is interesting not because of what you may find inside it, but because of what you won't. Should you choose to visit Kizzy Island, you may want to spend some time at the Church of Transfiguration to marvel at the architecture and learn more about the unique way it was built. The church was entirely constructed out of wood and does not include a single nail or screw. The entire church is holding itself together through a series of intricately placed interlocking logs. Now, some when they think of that would be picturing like a simple log cabin kind of thing, but no, it's incredibly intricate and features rounded teardrop domes and fine points, so what an incredible architectural feat. Number 4, St. John's Head, another one. Imagine having a head everyone wants to get their hands on. Like, just imagine being that person. This object, it sounds weird to be calling it an object. Anyways, this weird preserved head has been found in several places across the globe, and unless St. John the Baptist had several heads, it can't all be the real thing. And also, how did you even find it? But the most famous places you can go to decide for yourself are the Basilica of St. Sylvester I in Rome, or the Septan Church in Munich, Germany. Both claim to have the head on display for all to see of the legendary John the Baptist. Except in Rome, they've chosen to serve it up on a silver platter, while in Munich, they've cloaked it in fine fabric and jewels. The head also appears in Damascus in a mosque, also covered by fabric. So, I don't know, maybe the skull takes turns? Who knows? Okay, we're getting to our top 3, guys. If you like this video, you know what to do. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, because it helps us out and we love you for it. And also lets us know we're doing a good job. Number 3, the head of Oliver Plunkett. Here is yet another church that's ahead of its game. Oliver Plunkett was an Irish Catholic archbishop who died as a martyr and was the last, in fact, during the Popish plot. Long story short, when Henry VIII left the church, centuries of strife followed between the Catholics and the Protestants, which led to the alleged Popish plot. A rumored alleged plot by the Catholics to kill Charles II and put his Catholic brother James on the throne. Whether or not the plot was actually real, no one knows. Either way, Oliver Plunkett was arrested, drawn and quartered in 1681, and remains one of the most famous Catholic figures in Ireland to this day. After his death, his head was first brought to Rome and hidden in 1921, and now sits in St. Peter's Church in Drogheda, Ireland. He's got a scorch mark on his face because apparently someone tried to burn the head before it was saved by his friends. So it's there, you can see it, and there's only one of them this time. Number 2, the Chene Chapel. So yes, today we are covering weird things found in churches, but what about churches found inside weird things? Located in Allouville-Belfast in northern France is a church inside an oak tree. Chene Chapel, aka Chapel Oak as it translates to, honestly looks like a church designed for a scene in a Tim Burton film. The oak tree is over 800 years old, and legend says that William the Conqueror chose this tree to pray beneath before he left for England. When lightning hit the tree in the 17th century, it sealed the tree's fate as becoming a place of worship. There is an entire spiral staircase that surrounds the tree with 2 tiny chapels inside. It was later converted to a temple of reason to save it from French revolutionary atheists who tried to burn it down. But today it remains, and you can still visit it today. You can still visit it today either to pray or marvel at the spectacle. It's up to you. Number 1, Basilica of St. Ursula. A church made of bones. A sign of respect to a group of women made martyrs when they arrived in Rome. Basilica of St. Ursula in Cologne is the largest mosaic made from human body parts, and according to legend, they include the bones of an English princess named Ursula. St. Ursula lived somewhere between 300 to 600 AD and decided to go on a pilgrimage in Europe. But given the time as well as the fact that she was a princess, she could not travel alone. So she took a force of 1,000 virgin women with her. Their ship allegedly blew across the sea to Rome in a single day, but then another ambitious wind swept them off course Ars to Cologne. Unfortunately for Ursula and her league, the Huns were ravaging Europe at that time and were captured shortly into their journey. The elegant way of saying what happened is to say that they were martyred, so we'll say that. Relics of the princess were housed in the basilica, but in the Middle Ages a pit of bones were discovered. The bones were believed to be those of the princess and her followers, and they were placed within the church so that they may finally be at rest. Unfortunately, due to forensic analysis, the bones also include men, dogs, and babies, so I guess there are a lot of questions here that need answers. So if they're not St. Ursula's, whose are they?
Starting off this countdown, we have absolving sins with money. Basically, back in the day, the Catholic Church told people that they could absolve their sins and get a ticket to heaven if they just paid them. Like, you were paying the church for forgiveness. Sorry, that's not how these things work. It also got to the point where people were paying for future sins. Not only that, they claimed that for a fee, relatives could get their deceased loved ones out of purgatory. And people fell for this all. Not only that, but poor people thought that they were screwed. They're like, if we sin, it's over. We can't afford to pay to get our sins forgiven. I wouldn't be surprised if the rich went around committing crimes and killing people, then being like, here's some cash, I'm all good now, thanks. In our ninth spot, we have imprisoning Galileo. In 1663, Galileo was like, science is greater than God. He also said that the sun was the center of the universe and claimed that the earth moved around it. I mean, he was onto something there, but just, he was slightly off. Anyways, the church didn't like these claims because it conflicted with the teachings of the church, so they imprisoned him. He was imprisoned in his home for years. I mean, they threatened him with torture, imprisonment, and even being burned at the stake, so let's just say he got off easy compared to those other punishments. It wasn't until 350 years later did the church be like, okay, yes, we agree, Galileo was onto something. Moving on to number 8, we have cutting funding. For years, the church gave thousands of dollars to a non-profit organization, Compañeros, that would help Hispanic immigrants get access to healthcare, among other things. That was until they found out that Compañeros supported a gay and lesbian rights group. So the church cut the funding to this company for their connection to the LGBTQ2S+ community. They're not the only group that the church has done this to though. No, apparently, and I quote, since 2010, 9 groups from across the country have lost financing from the campaign because of conflicts with Catholic principles. Moving on to number 7, we have the gay clergy member. In 2018, a secret Catholic group came forward claiming they had information all about their clergy member, Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell. They claimed that he was using the gay male dating app Grindr and would visit gay bars weekly. Now let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being gay. What's wrong is shaming this poor man and outing him, and the poor man had to resign. Obviously, this is something the Catholic Church doesn't want us to know. Why? Because they say homosexual acts is immoral and contrary to the natural law. They also say homosexual tendencies are objectively disordered. And they also preach celibacy. So having a clergy member that is gay is highly controversial for them, and they tried to hide it. A lot of Catholics were outraged when word got out. Scariest part is how they found out about Jeffrey in the first place. Apparently the group was tracking his movements based on the apps he was using. Pretty terrifying and also very, very wrong. Moving on to number 6, we have Joan of Arc. Turns out that the church wasn't the biggest fan of Joan of Arc. In fact, at one point she was pretty much the Catholic Church's #1 public enemy. Long story short, she believed that God was speaking to her and had told her to start an uprising to get the English out of France. By doing so, she pissed off some high-powered Catholics who wanted her gone. So they decided to put her up for trial. But legit, they had no evidence against her, but they were like, whatever, fake it till you make it, right? So they just accused her of heresy with no evidence cause it was a lie. And on top of that, they denied her counsel, which was against the church's rules. They just hated her and wanted to get rid of her. I think there were like 70+ charges brought up against her. One of them being for wearing men's clothing, in which she was burned at the stake for. In 1431, in front of a crowd of thousands of people, they lit her on fire for wearing male clothing. But it was discovered after her death that she never even did this. Literally, they killed an innocent woman. Why? Because they were probably intimidated by her. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the slaying of women. Pope Innocent VII wasn't innocent at all. In fact, he was terrified of witches. He said that they were real and a huge threat, so he created a huge witch hunt. He dispatched his men to Germany to try witches, and due to the pressure he put on them, countless innocent women were killed after being accused of being witches. All because Pope Innocent was paranoid as hell. Not only that, but in 1487 a book was written all about these witches. It said that this book promoted burning them at the stake, and that influenced a number of killings. Plus, the book was just filled with lies, like saying these women would stop cows from producing milk and would ride on broomsticks in the air. It's just truly messed up and spread misinformation and paranoia. In our fourth spot, we have the burning of the dead. Apparently, the church holds grudges because 43 years after John Wycliffe passed away, they had his body dug up and burned. Now, let me explain how it got to this point. So, John saw fault in the Roman Catholic Church and saw how it was corrupt. So he believed that people should worship God and Jesus according to the Bible, not according to the popes and their bishops and priests, because people are corrupt. But the Bible is not. He also believed that people should interpret the Bible for themselves and not how other people tell them to interpret it. Well, the church did not like this at all. So when he passed away, they ordered all his books to be burned. They also ordered for his body to be unburied. And for some reason, it took them years to get this all done. So 43 years later, his body was finally unburied and then torched, and then his ashes were just thrown into the river. In our third spot, we have the misuse of power. Just this year, it was discovered that the French clergy had taken advantage of over 200,000 young individuals since the 1950s. It is absolutely disgusting. The height of this happened between the 1950s to the 1970s. That's when most of the cases were discovered. Then there was a resurgence of cases in the early 1990s. And obviously the Catholic Church doesn't want anyone to know about this. In fact, it's obvious that the church was turning a blind eye to the perpetrators. They were more focused on protecting themselves and their reputation. They did not care for the victims at all. A report said, and I quote, "The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse." Like I said, it's absolutely disgusting. Moving on to number 2, we have the number of priests. In January of 2002, it was discovered that 234 priests have had allegations of sexual misconduct made against them in the last 50 years. You heard me, 234. That just makes me sick to my stomach. These individuals are using their title and control to take advantage of others. Some of the victims did file lawsuits against a number of dioceses and got multiple $million-dollar settlements in some cases, but that still does not take away their trauma and their PTSD. Even though the Catholic Church held a worldwide summit to talk about all this, it wasn't that effective, as priests were still caught taking advantage of individuals years later. By now, we all know about the corruption within the Catholic Church, and the more I dig, the worse it gets. From constant cover-ups and lies to years of illegal activity. Let's talk about this and more only in today's video. Starting off this countdown, we have Pope Boniface VIII. This dude was the definition of corrupt and disgusting. So he was the head of the Catholic Church from 1294 until his death in 1303. Let's just say that he did not practice what the church was preaching. This dude was known to take advantage of a number of young men. In response, he said that it was as natural as rubbing one hand against the other. So he said taking advantage of the young was totally fine. Not only that, but one time he got it on with a married woman and her daughter. I know. It's gross. In our 9th spot, we have simony. Simony is something that was practiced around the Middle Ages. It's the act of buying your way into church offices. This became a huge problem in the 9th and 10th century. So basically, the church was selling positions in the office. This allowed people who had money to become clergy members. Half the time, they weren't even educated and couldn't even read or didn't know how to perform ordinary religious services. But what the church only cared about was money. In 1487, the Pope sold 24 offices, and people were outraged because because unqualified people were becoming bishops or cardinals. The church would also do this with religious items. They would sell them for tons of money and people would foolishly buy them from the church. In our 8th spot, we have the Pittsburgh priests. A couple of years ago, it was revealed that 6 Pennsylvania priests routinely took advantage of a number of individuals over the course of several decades. One disturbing report claims that they made a young man pose like Christ on the cross while they photographed him doing so. The photos were then sent to a number of other priests. The total amount of priests accused are 300. This is absolutely disgusting and I feel so bad for the innocent victims that were taken advantage of. In our 7th spot, we have ignoring the situation. When Pope Francis heard the story that I just mentioned, you know what he had to say? He said, and I quote, "Most of these cases belong in the past." Meaning, hey, thanks for coming forward, but let's move on from the past and ignore everything that happened. He continued on saying, and I quote, "If one member suffers, all suffer together with it." He said that after it was revealed how many priests were found guilty. Now, people weren't happy by him saying this because, first off, he's never going to feel the same suffering as the victims, and second, he's more worried about how bad this makes the church look rather than bringing justice for the victims. In our 6th spot, we have hiding the past. People are incredibly furious how the Pope handled all of the allegations made against the priests. The right thing for him to do would be allow criminal authorities to access the church records worldwide, so they can try and get justice for all the victims and get rid of the men taking advantage of their power and position. But of course, he won't allow that, nor will the other men who run the church. Instead, it's let's keep it all hush-hush and hope no other victims come forward. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the years of cover-ups. Back in 2018, it was revealed that Bishop Juan Barros of Chile was accused of covering up clerical abuse for years. The bishop denied, saying he never knew about this, but one of the victims say that he was there when one of the incidents happened and bore witness to it all and then did nothing. For years, this bishop covered up several incidences and protected the perpetrators. This just makes me sick. After being called out though, he did resign. Coming in at number 4, we have the punishments for disobeying. Bishop Gonzalo Duarte Garcia de Cortazar is another member of the Catholic Church that used his power to take advantage of a number of individuals. There were reports of him doing this all the way back to 1992. Back in 1992, he publicly slapped a student because the student refused to kiss him on the lips. In fact, this was common. If the students wouldn't do as he told them to, they would be slapped or punished. And Bishop Juan Barros was responsible for covering this all up, so word wouldn't get out. Coming in at number 3, we have the slush funds. The church has also been known to do sketchy and illegal things with their money, such as move Vatican money through slush funds across Europe. On top of that, they used $250 million of the church's money to invest in luxury London apartments, which ultimately tanked. They even contemplated investing hundreds of millions of dollars into oil fields. This money was supposed to support palpable charities. They also have a history of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. How great is that? Of course though, they'll always get away with it because they're the church. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Catholic clergy in France. Just this year, it was found that Catholic clergy members in France took advantage of over 216,000 individuals over the past 7 decades. Again, that is absolutely disgusting. On top of that, a report found that the church prioritized its own protection, so it told the victims to stay silent. It said that between 29,000 to 32,000 predators worked in the French Catholic Church between 1950 to 2020. The report also found, and I quote, "The church's attitude could be summarized as one of concealment, relativization, or even denial, with only a very recent recognition dating from 2015. The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered it." Starting off this countdown, we have the nuns. In 2019, Pope Francis for the first time addressed the horrors that happened to nuns in the Catholic Church. Priests and bishops and other church officials have been taking advantage of nuns for ages. This was an ongoing problem for years, and the church wasn't doing anything about it. They were too busy focusing on covering up even bigger scandals and issues. Over the years, more and more nuns have come forward saying that they were victims. Some were afraid to speak up because they were dependent dependent on the church and literally couldn't leave. Although Pope Francis acknowledged what happened, it's unclear the steps they are taking to prevent it in the future. In our 9th spot today, we have the Knights Templar. So Philip IV of France, as well as the Catholic Church, are directly responsible for torturing and executing innocent individuals back in the 14th century. Basically, Philip did not like the Templars in Spain and wanted to get rid of them. So he sent out his men to round them up, arrest them, and then imprison them. He then accused the innocent men of terrible crimes like sodomy, heresy, and renouncing Christ. Any of those crimes were punishable by the death penalty. Again, they were innocent, he just wanted to get rid of the Templar order. He then would torture the Templars so that they would confess. He would use a rack to stretch out their shoulders until they dislocated, or he would have their private parts smashed. This was all done while the church knew that the men were innocent. In our 8th spot, we have Pope Pius XII. In this case, it's what the church didn't do. According to a recent discovery of archives, Pope Pius XII was fully aware what the Nazis were doing during the Holocaust and chose to remain silent. He knew of the mass executions of the Jewish individuals and he dismissed this all. In fact, he said that they were unable to confirm the crimes, so that's why he didn't speak up against them. It says a lot when they refused to publicly condemn the Nazis. In fact, apparently his silence was so that the Germans didn't come for them, so that the church could always be successful. They were just caring about themselves and not about the thousands of innocent individuals being killed. Moving on to number 7, we have the violent murders. Back in 1095, Pope Urban II gave rise to the Crusades during his reign as the head of the Catholic Church. He called all Christians in Europe to go to war against the Muslims. And it was not pretty. It literally said that they killed so many Muslims that the street ran with blood. And this was only the beginning. Waves of crusades continued until 1396, and although Catholics were not the only religion involved in mass violence, Pope Urban got it all started. And it was a violent time to say the least. Everyone was killed, no matter their age. Some people's heads were even put on sticks and then they would carry them around to scare others. Like, that is hella messed up. In our 6th spot today, we have William Tyndale. During the 16th century, William took it upon himself to translate the Bible into vernacular English, so that more people were able to read it. But for some reason, the Catholic Church did not like him doing this, which is weird. Wouldn't they want the Bible translated so more people would become followers of it? Anyways, William actually had to go into hiding because the church was coming for him. They even burned copies of the Bible that were being smuggled around Europe. In the end, William was captured, tried for heresy, and then burned at the stake. He literally did nothing wrong. Want to know something even more messed up? Years later, the church was like, ah yes, let's translate the Bibles. They then turned to William's translations and used a whole lot of it, and then they never even apologized. Ridiculous. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Pope Alexander VI. So, Pope Alexander VI was said to be one of the worst popes in history. Why? Well, he is known for something known as the Banquet of Chestnuts. He basically invited 50 women over and told them to strip for him. Then he threw chestnuts on the floor and forced the women to get on their hands and knees and just surround their feet like animals. To make matters worse, he told the men that he invited that he would give the man who could get it on with the most women jewelry or fine clothes. So then they were all fighting over these women. This guy was hella corrupt and sick. Not only that, but he liked to watch horses get it on. That is disgusting. In our 2nd spot, we have the funding. CBC News and the Globe and Mail recently obtained files that expose the Catholic Church for spending some of the $79 million that it agreed to pay residential school survivors. That's right. They spent money that was meant to go to survivors of their residential schools. But instead, they took most of that money and put it into things like their Bible study group or for their personal lawyers and unapproved loans. Whereas other churches, including the Anglican, United, and Presbyterian Church, paid the full amount of compensation owed to the survivors without an issue. But the Catholic Church took the money and used it for themselves, which is disgusting since they played the biggest role in residential residential schools and the horrors that took place there.
10 is the pastor's son. This Reddit user said, "My dad was a pastor at a church for 4 years. Many people had died in this church before we got there, and my parents always went away and I decided to stay home. I went over to the church to grab some snacks from the back of the old sanctuary. I went in the back of it where the snack booth was, and mind you, this was the middle of the day, so it was completely lit up through the old stained glass windows. I bent down to grab some drinks from the mini fridge under the counter, and when I got back up and turned to walk out the door, I saw this figure standing in the doorway. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, no ears. Just a bald head wearing a long dark robe. As soon as I saw it, it vanished like that. Safe to say, I ran out of there as fast as humanly possible. Now another time, my cousin came over to spend the night at my house, and we wanted to play PS4, but the other controller was over in the church. So we walked across the yard into the church, and it was pitch black out. When we opened the door of the church, we might have made it 2 to 3 feet in before we heard the loudest blood-curdling scream I've ever heard from the bank of the new sanctuary. We ran out that door and back into my house so fast. For 9. Janitor story. This person said, "I worked as a janitor at a church for 7 or 8 years. The church was originally built in the early 1900s and had existing original buildings to it on top of new ones. I am Christian, so I believe in demonic entities. There were specific buildings that just gave me the heebie-jeebies to be in alone. I fully believe there's a lot of spiritual warfare we cannot see going on in and around churches. I would turn every single light on and unlock every door on the specific floor I would be cleaning, just so I would know they were all open in case any of them shut, because my coworkers and I always got creepy vibes from that building and would hear footsteps running sometimes. We also heard accounts of pastoral staff being in there while all the doors and cabinets repeatedly opened and slammed shut. I knew which buildings had been used previously for exorcisms, and the things that went on during the exorcism will never leave my mind. One time, I was shampooing chairs in that particular room, and the entire stack of chairs in front of me started to rattle and shake. This happened to me 2 to 3 times while working there, and no, it wasn't the machine or my fault with stacking the chairs properly that caused it. I'd spoken to a leader in the church about my experiences, and basically he said, yeah, it happens. Number 8. The sleepover. This user said, "Years ago for a church event I was forced into going to, we all had a terrifying experience. The setup was boys slept anywhere they wanted to downstairs, and girls were free to sleep wherever upstairs. Except some of the rooms were locked off because the church was being renovated. Night rolls around and us girls migrate to the nursery, and most of the guys just crash in the small indoor gym basketball court. Only one guy couldn't sleep. Above the basketball court are windows to another room that was locked off, and one of the guys kept seeing flashing lights and the silhouettes of people looking down on him. He didn't stay in the gym very long. Now around the same time, myself and the other girls were in the nursery. The door was locked, and next to it was a one-way window. Inside was like a mirror. Well, I started hearing banging and scratching on the door. I freaked and looked up to see 2 grinning faces staring back at all of us. Now remember, we're on the mirror side. So one of us bolted towards the door, and we heard stomping down the hall, but no one was there. Number 7. Haunted office. This worker said, "The church campus consists of the sanctuary, the office, an empty Jupcrit house where the priest used to live that was later used as a meeting space until it was condemned, and a cemetery with the oldest graves being those of War of 1812 soldiers. Now a priest died in the house in the late 1800s, and he still haunts the place. When I first started working there, I was in the office with a member of the congregation who told me that on several occasions when they left the old house and turned off all the lights, they would turn around and see the lights had switched back on inside through the windows. When I left the office that day by myself, I turned off the lights. At the last light switch, I felt almost an electric buzz through my finger. I went back to my desk to grab my things and lock the door, and the light switch I had turned off was on. I've seen flashes of light in a dark windowless room, and I saw a man cross in front of my headlights and disappear. He had dark hair and was wearing a white shirt. I once unlocked the deadbolt on the door to the church, and when I went to turn the knob to go inside, something turned it in the opposite way in my handle. I've seen motion detector lights outside turn on by themselves, and when I've jumped in front of them waving my hands, they never come on. My boss also told me that members have said they've seen the priest looking out the windows of the house.
Number 5, St. Nicholas's Church in Pluckley. If that's not an English sounding name, I don't know what is. Plunkett. Look at this spooky image here. I don't think it gets any more classically Gothic horror than that either. St. Nicholas's Church in Plunkett, as well as the town itself, is said to be very, very haunted. The church, dating back several centuries, has become known for its paranormal activity. Legend goes that the churchyard is haunted by various spirits. Visitors claim to have witnessed apparitions and strange occurrences in and around the church. Haunted occurrences range from ghostly figures to unexplained sounds. One of the most well-known spirits said to haunt the grounds is known as the Red Lady, who roams the church grounds at night in search of her stillborn child. Plunkett as a town has also earned quite the reputation, said to be the most haunted village in Britain. The village's population to ghost ratio is very out of whack. It's a small place, but it has 12 known ghosts roaming around it. And at number 4, we have Rouse Church. This is a 12th century sandstone church in the Czech Republic. It's adorned with a peculiar feature above its main entrance, a small stone face believed to depict the devil. The legend surrounding this traces back to the church's construction and involves a local troll. According to the lore, during the church's initial construction, a troublesome troll, one of those in the comments that keeps asking about people's hair. I wonder if this is him. Anyway, this troll, angered by the sound of church bells, consistently disrupted the building process by moving materials across a stream every night. Frustrated builders eventually abandoned the site altogether, choosing to build the church in its current location nearby. Still discontented, the troll decided to relocate 26 miles northwest to Kolleberg. There, the troll expressed a desire to return home, but claimed he was hindered by what he called the jingling gray mare, a reference to the church and its chiming bells, which he was too afraid to name directly. The church's distinctive stone head above the entrance is linked to this legend. There are 3 main theories about its origin. One goes that it represents Ra, the giant, credited with the church's construction, another associating with Roland, a medieval Christian knight, and the most prominent belief is that it portrays the devil. The idea here is that the devil's face is seen as a protective measure against trolls and malevolent beings. And at number 3, the specter of Newbie Church. This image here is very famous, taken in 1963 by Reverend Kenneth F. Lord in the Church of Christ the Consoler, found on the grounds of Newbie Hall in North Yorkshire. Reverend Lord had been photographing the church. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but once he developed the pictures, he discovered a mysterious semi-translucent cloaked figure standing at the church altar. Reverend Lord claimed to be alone in the church at the time of taking the photo. The figure in the image looks a lot like a plague doctor or some malevolent type of spirit. It definitely doesn't look friendly, but skeptics quickly dismissed the photograph as a hoax, saying it was probably just double exposure or something. So Reverend Lord sent the photograph to experts to be examined, and according to their findings at the time, the photo showed no signs of tampering. Apparently, at least according to them, the image was genuine. And at number 2, we have Chernobyl Church. Pretty much any photo taken in Chernobyl is going to be eerie, given the context that it's the site of one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, but the abandoned church has to be one of the creepiest abandoned sites. That and the abandoned school probably takes second place. The church is beautiful, but looking at these images, it's hard not to have this strange feeling about it. Human beings are just designed to be a little uncomfortable in big, empty places where there should be people. Falls into that liminal spaces realm of horror. Plus, the church is in the middle, again, of Chernobyl, so apart from the harmful air, you have mutated animals and God knows what else lurking around. Imagine having to spend a whole night alone in this place with nothing but a sleeping bag and a flashlight. Would you do that for like $500? I'd consider it. If anyone wants to offer me like an e-transfer for $500 to like stay in one of these haunted places, I might consider it. That could be fun to film. Finally, though, we have St. George's Church in Czech Republic. This is what this abandoned church looks like now. Built in the 14th century, this Gothic marvel faced abandonment in the 1960s because of structural concerns. People had already thought the place was haunted, but then the roof literally caved in on the place during mass one day, which certainly didn't make people feel any less uneasy about going into the place. Over the years, the church was broken into, vandalized, and robbed. Believing the place was culturally significant, artist Jacob Hadrava stepped in with a unique vision to breathed some life into the decaying church. Instead of the usual restoration, he populated the place, all the empty pews, with ghostly sculptures crafted from plaster. And these eerie figures now sit in this sacred place, frozen in a congregation that blurs the line between art and the supernatural. Stories of a haunting atmosphere within this church still persist today. Some claim to sense an otherworldly presence as they explore the dimly lit space with whispers of ghostly apparitions and unexplained sounds.
At number 10, we have the Temple of Amida in Japan. Let's kick off this list by flying over to Japan. The Japanese have some of the best ghost stories in history. I still have scenes from The Ring and The Grudge burned into my brain. Those were perfect movies for me to watch as a 13-year-old boy. I remember the girl in the closet who looks like she just got pushed through a trash compactor and then left out in the sun for 8 years. Yeah, when you're 13 and you see that out of nowhere, you don't forget it overnight. Well, this is a classic Japanese ghost story from the Temple of Amida that was built 700 years ago. Legend goes that a blind man was brought to play music for a dead emperor in the graveyard. He was led by a priest, but the blind dude didn't know he was playing music for a bunch of ghosts. The priest would cover his body in protective symbols so the spirits couldn't see him. But one time he brought the blind dude in, but he forgot to cover his ears, so the spirits cut his ears off. Then he died in the graveyard. It's said that you can still hear the blind guy's music playing in the graveyard. Ooh. At number 9, we have the Church of St. Nicholas in Plucky, England. We're gonna jump on a plane and fly over to jolly old England for the most haunted town in the UK. Plucky, England is a place where the hauntings are hot and the people still live there. Everyone knows you can live wherever you want, right? It's not the 1800s anymore, where if you try to move to a new town, half your family will die and it'll take you a year and a half. Plucky is so haunted that when Halloween rolls around, they need to bring in more cops because so many drunk dummies come to the town to dress slutty and see if they can run into a phantom. And in this town is the Church of St. Nicholas, where the spirit of Lady Deering walks around looking for her dead kid. It's said that she was buried in 7 lead coffins, but it didn't stop her from breaking out and haunting the hell out of this church. I don't even think lead does anything to ghosts. I think it's supposed to be silver. They were probably like 7 silver coffins? Jesus Christ, that's expensive. Let's use lead and hope for the best. At number 8, we have the Chapel of Bones. Now it's time to head over to Portugal for one of the creepiest arts and crafts projects I've ever seen. Back in Portugal, somewhere in the 16th century, the cemeteries were getting too full. People were dying too quick. So when this happens, they need to dig up all the old, already rotted bodies, take out the dry bones, and then plop the fresh bodies into the hole. Now usually when you got something like this happening, they take all the bones, then make something like the Paris catacombs. But that's not what the monks of the Church of St. Francis wanted to do. They were like, hey, let's take all these dope bones and make a bone house so everyone can bone in it. No, they did build a chapel made of bones, but that's not why they built it. They built this clavicle castle to remind people they were going to die, so they should be good people before they die. They were literally like, you see this? You see this spooky skeleton house? Be a better person! It's made with concrete and using around 5,000 bones. I wonder if that's legal to do today. Like if I built a little doghouse made out of bones on my front yard for my dog and to scare kids off my lawn. Could I do that? At number 7, we have St. Andrew's Church in Selkirk, Manitoba. Get your winter coat, we're heading over to Selkirk, Manitoba to check out the Church of St. Andrew's. We're going all over the world with this one. By the end of this video, you'll have no excuse not to check out a scary church. Unless you're like me and you're just not going to do that because that's a terrible way to spend your day. Well, the Church of St. Andrews is nicknamed St. Andrews on the Red because if you're lucky, you'll see a set of glowing red eyes in the church. Great, I put on all my nice clothes for church and I just pissed myself. People have also said that they've seen a ghost dude and a ghost lady walking around the graveyard. And my favorite haunting from this church is people have said they've seen a ghost car. What? I didn't know ghosts could have cars. This might be the only ghost with a car. If this is true, this guy for sure bangs. If you're the only dude in the afterlife with a ball and ride, you're getting laid. Dude, this ghost is probably just riding past the cemetery to pick up chicks. This dude could be driving the only Phantom Rolls-Royce Phantom. At number 6, we have the St. Mark's Episcopal Church in the UK. Back to England, guys, it's apparently the bell tower of this haunted church that is the hotspot for supernatural activity. Legend says that the stonemason who was building the tower fell to his death before the tower was finished, and then started haunting the workers who came to finish the tower. They pleased the spirit by building him his own room in the tower tower, which is so funny to me. They were like, we know you're upset that you're dead, but we all came together and got you something nice. Here's your room. There's a little bench in it, there's a memory foam mattress, and we know you're a stonemason, so we filled the bookcase full of the best books about stonemasonry. Do you like it? At number 5, we have St. George's Church in the Czech Republic. This church is old as hell. It was built in 1352. I'll bet money that this building is not up to code. Well, back in the day when this church was shiny and new, it didn't take long before the people thought it was cursed because fires kept breaking out in the darn thing. People kept going though. In the Czech Republic, they're not afraid of curses. But in 1968, when the roof collapsed on some people during a funeral, everyone decided to stop going to church. Kinda. They held mass outside. These guys really love God. Because there was now a massive hole in the roof, the townfolk needed to find a way to fix it. And they did this by playing up the whole curse story of the church. They put in some sculptures of shrouded figures in the church and then turned it into a haunted tourist attraction and raised enough money to fix the church. Oh, this one's kinda sweet. At number 4, we have Basilica of Our Lady of Good Health. We're in India, baby, in the town of Velankani, where the site of this church was picked because they saw spirits beforehand. They wanted the church to be haunted even before it was built. Interesting choice. There's several ghosts who have been walking around this place, primarily one of a woman and her young child, who people think is Mother Mary and Jesus himself. People have even said that they've been healed by these ghosts, but I think they're probably liars. At number 3, we have the Church of Bones. Another church covered in bones. Bricks must have been expensive back then. Well, this one is way crazier than the Bone House. It all started in 1278 when an abbot came to the spot where the church stands today with a handful of dirt. He said the dirt was from the site where Jesus was crucified, and then he dusted the land with it. Then everyone in Europe wanted to be buried there. It was the place to get buried, baby. So there were a ton of bodies there. Then in the 1800s they wanted to build a church there, so they had to dig up all the bodies, and it was one dude's job to stack all the bones. He made 6 pyramids of bones from 70,000 people. The bones were later used to decorate the whole church. There's a chandelier in there that has every bone from the human body. At number 2, we got Old Rock Church in Texas. We made it to America, where this little abandoned church is still a happening place. It was built between 1884 and 1886, but shut down not too long after because another church got built nearby. But that didn't stop this place from being a hotspot, because apparently ghosts still go there, especially on Sundays. This new church may have had a fresh coat of paint, but the Old Rock Church had followers so devoted they still came to church after they died. People have seen all sorts of ghosts and lights coming from this church, but the craziest haunting that happens there is when people hear a full choir singing. Damn, this place is lit! And number 1 on our list is Church of Greyfriars. For our first place, we shoot back over to England. The Church of Greyfriars was once the most haunted place in London, but now only the spire stands. And it's haunted for good reason. It's a burial place of the Queen known as the She-Wolf of France. She had her husband killed, King Edward II, by having a hot iron rod inserted into his anus so it would burn his insides. It said you can still hear his screams. When she died, she was buried with her husband's heart on her chest. And on the full moon, her ghost will rise, clenching the beating heart of her dead husband. Yeah, you get killed by a hot poker in the butt and your screams echo out for eternity. That's how you get number 1 on this list.
Coming up in our number 10 spot, we have the Church of Satan. Well, if you grew up watching any and all Hollywood movies, then you probably are with me when I say maybe it's a good idea that these churches are banned. But despite how creepy and scary Hollywood has made these churches to be, the church states that they are not depicted in an accurate light. The Church of Satan is a church that was founded by Anton LaVey. The church does not believe in worshiping a literal, powerful, supernatural Satan. In fact, they reject people that believe in this, and they refer to themselves as skeptical atheists, people who question everything. They describe their church as an underground cell system of individuals who share the basis of our philosophy, they say. The Church of Satan isn't banned everywhere. In fact, it is quite strong in the USA,
say. But in Canada, for example, it has been banned. But like many banned religions or banned practices for centuries and centuries, people always find a way to still do whatever they want. In our number 9 spot, we have the Okinoshima, considered a place of worship. Okinoshima is actually a forbidden island that is considered sacred land. Forbidden to all women, that is. Yeah, we're in the 21st century, but yep, there's still some places we can't go to. Wild. Only priests, researchers, military, and the media are allowed on the island. Interesting combination. Apparently no one is allowed to speak of anything they see on the island. It is that secretive. You would think that they maybe wouldn't want to invite the media to the island then, but people are strange. The island is off the coast of Munakata in Japan. The islanders are said to worship the kami, which are spirits that are venerated in the religion of Shinto. It has several spiritual traditions, including a ritual purification. This must be performed by undressing and bathing in the ocean. Archaeological evidence suggests that religious rituals have been performed there since the 4th century. So interesting. Too bad I could never go there because the idea of getting to see such a spiritual place is such an exciting thought. In our number 8 spot, we have Christianity in China. It is not unknown that China operates under a communist regime, so it will probably not surprise you to hear that in 2014, crosses on Christian places of worship were being taken down and the people were discouraged to not go there. Of course the people did anyway, and they even held an overnight vigil before the police arrived. Apparently in 2014, in the town of Wenzhou at the Longgang Township Gratitude Church, the public security officials took down the 10-foot crucifix above the church. The congregates didn't resist this action, but of course it must be extremely hard for them to know that their own people will not support their right to worship. This has happened in many towns in China over many years, and as of today, I wonder if they are still against Christianity, or more specifically, the cross symbol. If there's anyone watching who knows the answer, I would love to know in the comment section below. In our number 7 spot, we have Eritrea. Often referred to as Africa's North Korea, Eritrea has some pretty harsh viewpoints when it comes to Christianity. It is said that its president, Afwerki, has overseen a volatile authoritarian regime that rests on human rights violations. Christians that are not a part of state-approved churches are actually considered a threat to the country and an agent of the West. Huh. I've heard this so many times before. Perhaps there is something us Westerners are missing that everyone else sees. What do we believe in that is such a threat to a whole society? What do we know that makes us a threat? In the summer months of 2019, over 150 Christians were arrested. Over 70 prisoners were being held in a type of prison where they are sent to an underground tunnel where they are forced to work and dig. Christians in this country have been fleeing over the last few years due to the violence and imprisonment. In our number 6 spot, we have St. Mary the Virgin, Clophill, England. Not so much banned as it is abandoned, but considering the spookiness that seems to go on at this church, I'm banning you from ever going to check it out. Unless you're a ghost whisperer. Research purposes are allowed. Just joking, go at your own risk. This church is extremely old, being built in 1350. The locals of the town believe the church to be haunted by the devil, as the altar is facing the southern direction, which is commonly known as a symbol of hell. On another note though, people have reported ghost hauntings and satanic presence in the church, so perhaps it is the entrance to hell. Regardless, people are told to be weary of the church, but I'm sure teenagers still go there and hold seances. I would. In our number 5 spot, we have the Church of Mary of Zion. This isn't a church that is fully banned, but it does have a part of it that has been forbidden for centuries. This is a church that claims to hold the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, or otherwise known as the Ark of God, is a very sacred relic of the Israelites. The area that it is being held in is banned and forbidden to any regular person. It's apparently kept in this church in the city of Axum, but there have been rumors that it was moved. Regardless, it is extremely guarded, and the monks that guard the treasure have been trained to kill with their bare hands. Okay, yeah, that's terrifying. They just sound like FBI agents. I bet they are, just dressed as monks. Anyways, the secrecy around the object has made it hard for archaeologists to confirm that it is indeed real. Apparently though, a historian once said that after viewing it, they concluded that it was a replica. But I wonder how much of that is real and how much of that is just to try to get people off the trail of wanting to see it. I doubt it would be highly protected if it wasn't real. Coming up at our number 4 spot, we have the Oradour Church in France. ghosts. This is a church that has a very deadly past, and so be cautious if you go there. You have been warned. So much loss of life took place in this church that it is believed to be haunted, and many warned to not go near it for that reason. The town experienced a very deadly massacre in World War II, and specifically this church took a hit. A horrific tragedy that even though it's been many years later, the energy probably still lingers. So I ban you from going there, unless it's for educational reasons once again, then fair enough. But man, there are definitely ghosts, and I would not want someone to feel the sadness of wars past. The site is still the way that it was after this horrific day, but apparently there's talk that a new church will be built on the grounds. A lovely thought, but I bet you it won't get rid of the ghosts. In our number 3 spot, we have King James VI and First. Known as King James VI, King of Scots, and King James I of England and Ireland, he ruled from 1603 to 1625. England and Scotland were considered sovereign states, and yet he ruled both of them. Being the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and just being a king in general, you can imagine the pressure that was put on him. He came across many religious challenges in his reign, and it was his decisions that led to a wave of anti-Catholicism. He might have been baptized Catholic, but he eventually became Presbyterian and then leaned Anglican during his reign. He enforced strict penalties to practicing Catholics, despite the fact that he said he would allow them to practice as long as they lay low and be quiet about it. He put policies in place that aimed at only punishing a few Catholics instead of creating massive bloodshed, with the goal to hopefully motivate practitioners to leave the country. People still practiced in private though, including one of James's friends, the first Earl of Northampton, Henry Howard. In our number 2 spot, we have the Vatican Archives. Okay, not a banned church per se, but a banned church library, filled with secrets, lies, and church documents for centuries. Arguably a church of knowledge than just a regular worship church, but I'm sure the viewers that actually get to step inside to read its books quite definitely worship the books. At least I would. This is a place that is completely banned to the everyday public. Formed in 1475, but it is believed to possibly be older. Only scholars in higher ranks within the church can enter, and the scholars must show documentation of their qualifications and research needs. People have tried to break in over the years, but the archives are heavily guarded, and there has been no successful break-ins in a long time. People speculate that the archives hold proof of aliens being present on our planet, but I bet you they have way more interesting facts than that tucked away in their shelves. Probably proof of time travel. Arguably cooler than aliens? Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 1 spot, we have the 1535 ban on Catholic churches. As a direct response from wanting to divorce his wife, but not being allowed to, King Henry VIII of England decided to declare himself to be the only supreme head on earth of the Church of England in place of the Pope. Talk about ego. Anybody that continued to stay devoted to the Catholic Church was executed and considered martyrs to the faith. Any act of allegiance was considered treason. It wasn't until after his passing that his daughter, Queen Mary I, decided to reinstate Catholicism as England's state religion, only to have her actions reversed by Queen Elizabeth I, who would physically punish anyone who didn't attend Anglican church services, and of course, there were still a fair few that still did.
And we're starting things off at number 10 with the Red Ghost. Now, this is actually a piece of footage, not a photo, but like I always say, footage is typically more entertaining anyway. This clip was sent to the YouTube channel Vault of Fear, who shared it online. The name of the church isn't given, nor is the location, but we see the camera person filming the church. Now, they either have terrible cinematography skills, or they're just kind of nervous because they saw something before they started filming. I'm not sure which. They eventually rest on the church altar though, where we clearly see a semi-translucent red figure walk from left to right. It then seems to crouch down before completely vanishing. This could definitely be a hoax, but if it isn't, and this is just what the person captured in camera, it's pretty incredible. Definitely not a trick of the light or anything. That looks like a figure walking across the floor. What do you all think though? Hoax? Genuine? Share your thoughts down below, and leave your comments down below even if you don't have any thoughts on this, and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Nothing to lose. Number 9. Spooky figures. Back in 2017, 35-year-old Leah Harrison, visiting Lincoln Cathedral, captured something strange in a picture she snapped. She described the figure as looking like the ghostly figures of a woman and a boy, possibly the ghosts of a mother and son. It's kind of hard to make out these figures. They could definitely just be smudges or pixelation from the camera, but what adds to the credibility possible ghosts caught on camera here is that this church is said to be haunted. With it being constructed all the way back in 1072, the place certainly has a lot of history, so if these mysterious figures are indeed ghosts, then who could they be? Well, there's an interesting tale surrounding this church, and it all started in 1349 during the bubonic plague. As the Black Death swept over the town of Lincoln, the bodies began piling up, and the church, being overrun with corpses, eventually piled a bunch of them in a mass grave next to the cathedral. The spirits of those buried without proper ceremony or blessing are said to haunt the grounds, rising on the anniversary of their burial, forever trapped between heaven and hell. Sticking with Lincoln Cathedral for a moment, let's talk about the haunted well, pictured here. This well is associated with an urban legend surrounding the devil. Now, the well definitely has an old allure about it, being constructed nearly 1,000 years ago, but there's nothing immediately unsettling about it at first glance. But legend has it, if you walk around the well 7 times and stick your finger into one of the holes in the door, the devil himself will cast judgment on you. If you're deemed a good person, you'll simply feel his breath on your finger, but if he deems you a real miserable piece of crap, he'll chomp your finger clean off. What constitutes bad or good to Satan? That's hard to say. I think it's safe to assume, though, that sticking your finger into strange holes is probably not the best idea without knowing exactly what's going on in there. Next, we have St. Mary's Church in Ackenham. St. Mary's Church is rumored to be haunted by the devil. According to local legends, the devil is believed to rest beneath the church, specifically beneath a broken tombstone known as the Devil's Grave. The church, situated in the small village of Ackenham, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, has gained a reputation for supernatural occurrences over the years. The tale goes that the devil himself is said to have chosen this location as his resting place. The focal point of this belief is a particular tombstone within the churchyard, colloquially referred to as the Devil's Grave. And legend goes that disturbing the Devil's Grave could cause the Lord of Darkness himself to rise, inviting malevolent forces into the world. At number 6, we have another St. Mary's Church, this one in Clophill. If I were to conjure up an image in my mind of a haunted church, probably look exactly like this. This 14th century chapel fell into disuse in 1848, and over the years, it's gained a reputation for being a haunted site with possible satanic activity. During the 60s, evidence of disturbing activities surfaced when the church and its grounds were investigated. The walls of the chapel were found covered in graffiti, with occult symbols and ritualistic markings on it. Graves in the churchyard had been disturbed, pointing to possible disturbing activities taking place on the grounds. There are also urban legends associated with this place too. One legend goes that the church is haunted by the devil, mostly because of the orientation of the church altar. And traditionally, Christian churches are constructed to face the eastern direction, symbolizing the direction of the heavens and the anticipated coming of the Messiah. But in the case of St. Mary's Church, the altar faces the southern direction.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have St. Mary the Virgin Church in Clophill in the United Kingdom. She may lay in ruins, but the chances are that this dilapidated building will ruin you. Sitting quiet in the sleepy old English village of Clophill, there is said to be a force of evil here. Blimey. Laying abandoned and in ruins is the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, built in 1350. Interestingly, the church's altar faces south, towards hell, rather than the traditional east, which is where churches usually face to point to heaven. Basically, a whole bunch of Christians believe that the south-facing altar was constructed on purpose, and that the church was secretly a satanic meeting spot. The church has a very long history of reported hauntings, and people believe that the satanic rituals still take place here. The graveyard was desecrated in the 1970s, so now all of the gravestones sit facing the perimeter wall, which kind of makes it even creepier. Coming into number 9, we have St. Paul's in New York. St. Paul's Chapel is often named the Little Chapel That Stood, and when you see pictures of it, you'll totally understand why. Built in 1766, the chapel now sits among skyscrapers at the base of the World Trade Center. It's the final resting place of Alexander Hamilton, the place that George Washington prayed on his inauguration day. It survived the Great Fire of New York and the 9/11 attacks, becoming a safe haven and spot of refuge for those who work to save people from the wreckage and put out the fires. All in all, it actually kinda sounds like a good place, so why is it so scary? I'll cut to the chase. There's a headless ghost here. A ghost without a head. Double the spooks. Actor George Frederick Cook was said to have donated his skull to the theatre to be used as the iconic piece in Hamlet. Good on him. He was buried sans head at the St. Paul's Cemetery and is now said to wander the grounds looking for his, head. St. Paul isn't the worst of them for sure. I actually kind of think it's a bit quirky and I like the sound of a headless ghost. Coming into number 8, we had the Chernobyl Church. Has anyone watched Chernobyl on Netflix? Yeah, I haven't, but I keep meaning to. I hear it's really good. Let me know if you have in the comment section. Anyway, on the 28th of April 1986, a nuclear reactor exploded at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near Pripyat. Since that day, there has been a 10-kilometer exclusion zone that won't be safe to enter for a very long time. Nuclear cleanup is still too dangerous and is set for the year 2065, which is 80 years on from the disaster. Right now there are a whole load of abandoned places sitting there, poisoned and spooky. Some people have even broken into the exclusion zone to see them, although very much at their own risk. One adventurer came across this old, sad and abandoned church in Krasny village in the exclusion zone. Yikes! Abandoned and radioactive. Do you want to have a look inside? Of course you do! Honestly, so spooky. Spookier still, coming into number 7, we have Egg Hill Church in Pennsylvania. Egg Hill kinda sounds like a cute, sweet place, doesn't it? But actually, it really isn't. The now abandoned Egg Hill Church is rumored to be one of the more haunted buildings in the world, filled with unholy spirits. According to legend, a pastor arrived on the job in 1927, and shortly after he delivered his sermon, he decided to kill his entire flock as they took Holy Communion. Then, he killed himself by hanging himself. I can't confirm this with research, it's likely just an urban legend, but nonetheless, a lot of people think that the building is extremely haunted and very hateful. Coming into number 6, we have St. Michan's Church in Dublin. Ireland. A country of so much rich history. Rich history can also be translated to a lot of dead people over the years too. It's kind of the case with this church. It was built in 1095 on the site of an old Norse chapel. It has a history of dead people extending back 1,000 years, which is bound to give a place a certain vibe. The church was rebuilt in 1686 and a large pipe organ was installed. Apparently Handel is said to have first played his Messiah. Despite the change in building structure, the crypt remains the same. Now the crypt is made of limestone, which is perfect for preserving mummies. Amongst the bodies in the crypt are an 800-year-old crusader, a 400-year-old nun, 2 brothers who took part in a rebellion against the British, a thief identified by their missing hands. Fact for you, up until July 2017, visitors were actually allowed to touch the mummies. Oddly, while the crypt is really good for preserving human remains, it seems that the wooden coffins that they're buried in just keep bursting open and exposing bodies. Ugh. Sadly, in February 2019, the crypt was broken into and bodies were assaulted. The head of the crusader was stolen and the nun's body was chopped and decapitated. Another body was turned over in its grave. So who would disrespect the dead like this? We don't know, but luckily the crusader's head was eventually found and returned to the body, but I'm thinking there are some angry mummies in that crypt. Coming into number 5, we have the Borgund Stave Church in Norway. I would love to go to Norway, but to me, this is just looking creepy from the off. Creepy, but I have to say a little bit cool. It kind of looks less like a church and more so like a witch's mansion, or maybe the Weasley's burrow. I guess that is kind of a witch's and wizard's home, even if they're good ones, but still, it's creepy just to look at. The church is slap bang in the middle of a medieval cemetery, and it is made from wood, but has somehow stood for 1,000 years, which to me is even more weird. There are strange engravings of animals and mystical creatures inside, and ancient runes to boot. Here be witches? Dragons? The imagination runs wild. Do you like unexplained wailing sounds? If so, you will love this at number 4. We have the Church of St Andrew on Staten Island. This church dates back to the early 1700s and is located in Richmond, Staten Island. The church was used as a hospital during the American Revolution, and it seems to have left a deep scar on the building. These days it is said that the spirits of the dead soldiers haunt the halls, wailing, walking, knocking, creeping, just generally being creepy little ghosts. Candles flicker without wind, and some claim to have seen them float. There's a chill in the air here, even on a hot, heavy summer's day. Coming into number 3, we have Oradour-sur-Glane Church in France. This is one of the saddest and scariest church stories of all time. War was an abysmal period of time for Europe, and between the two feuds, decades were lost to bloodshed. While the majority of the countries eventually recovered, deep scars were left in the land. A number of places that existed before simply didn't survive, including Oradour-sur-Glane. On the 10th of June 1944, German SS soldiers destroyed the French village, killing 642 of its inhabitants, with just 20 people managing to escape. The black shirts rounded up the men and shot them at point-blank range in a barn, but the church was a true horror. Women and children were rounded up into the village church, locked inside, and then burned alive as German soldiers set fire to the holy building. Hundreds of innocent people lost their lives in these walls. Honestly, I feel really bad for the people that had to go and find them there. French president of the time, Charles de Gaulle, ordered that the town remained untouched as a memorial to those who lost their lives in the savage attack. People can still visit the area and see the village left ransacked as it was that night. They can also see what remains of the church, if they dare. Coming into number 2, we have the Sedlec Ossuary in Czech Republic. It isn't the outside of this church that is the issue. Have a little look. See, no scarier than any other church, right? Well, my friends, step inside. This church is filled with the remains of 40 to 70,000 people, which, yikes. Not even that, like out of sight, out of mind. If they were buried somewhere or like in the walls, that would be fine. But this chapel is decorated with the bones and skulls of the dead. There are pillars made out of bones, a chandelier of bones, a coat of arms made from actual arms, and then I'm sorry, but why is there a skull on this cherub's knee? I'm honestly kind of petrified. Why are their skulls holding bones in their mouths? This is macabre and I don't like it. It seems that the church dates back to 1278, but in the early 16th century, bones were exhumed by a blind monk. A lot of the bones are thought to belong to plague victims. Ugh. So, how do you top a church made of bones? Ho ho ho.
In at number 10, this creepy video was captured at the Lincoln Cathedral in England. First of all, the exterior of this church looks like it could be the set of a horror movie, and what possessed this person to go to church at night? I have no idea. Well, it's a little bit too dark and windy for my liking. Well, things took a turn for the worse when they stumbled across this. Well, take a look for yourself. Okay, did I see that right? It looks like a face is protruding from the wall, and then all of a sudden it disappears when the cameraman went to investigate it. I'd be getting the heck out of there, and I'd probably never return to that church ever again. I'd probably have to make a pit stop to another church because I have to do some Hail Marys after seeing that ghost head. A creepy art project is up next at number 9. The St. George Church was left abandoned after the roof collapsed. The locals in the area saw this as a bad omen, so they didn't even want to repair the church. But I guess an art student took it upon themselves to fill in the pews with creepy ghost figures instead. Take a look. Okay, this is not okay in my books. Actually, this might be the scariest art project that I've ever seen. I feel like if the church wasn't haunted before, well, it definitely is now. A shadowy figure is up next at number 8. This extremely scary picture was taken inside of a Catholic church somewhere over in Poland. Everyone there was celebrating a first communion, but the party was crashed by the shadowy figure who was seen creeping between the aisles. It's quite possible that this is just a result of a camera malfunctioning, but the thing is, are you willing to bet your life on that? I know I'm not. Insane insect infestation crawls onto our list at number 7. I get it, sometimes older buildings have an insect problem. You might see the occasional ant or centipede. You know, I can forgive that, but what I can't forgive is this. Is this real life right now? Is this the only church in town? Why are people content with this? How the heck can you be singing at a time like this? I mean, you all need to bathe in some holy water and all stand in front of a strong fan to get all of those termites off of you. This is not okay. I'm pretty sure this church needs an exorcism and an exterminator at the same time. Number 6, the man with glowing eyes. During a service at a church, someone accidentally captured this picture of a man with some pretty unsettling eyes. Some people are even saying that this creature isn't even human, while others think that he's wearing glasses and it's just the light reflecting off of them. I honestly don't know what to believe. He kind of looks like a gnome from hell, and those people in the church might be in a whole lot of trouble. But did you guys also notice there's a weird floating object hovering over the guy next to the gnome? I mean, what the heck is going on in this church? I think everyone inside needs to be blessed. Bringing us to number 5, we have a ghost spirit caught on camera. A paranormal investigation team were exploring an old abandoned church in England, well, when they stumbled across this eerie sight. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. As you can see, a ghostly figure passes by one of the windows, and it looks like they're wearing a long white dress or robe of some sort. This church dates back to 1135, so it's very possible that it's had its fair share of scary ghost encounters. Next up on our list, number 4, we have a Jesus statue caught moving. Okay, pay close attention to the statue's eyes, because what I'm about to show you guys is gonna happen pretty quickly. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. How the heck did the guy filming this have no reaction whatsoever? I'm completely traumatized, and I wasn't even there for that. I feel like Jesus was staring into my soul, and he didn't even like what he saw, so he just closed his eyes. This statue of Jesus Christ is located inside of the church in Mexico, and since this video was released, thousands of people have been going to this church to watch the statue move for themselves. But I'm pretty sure a moving statue would just deter me from ever visiting it. A ghost makes an appearance at a shrine, and this takes us to number 3. This next clip I'm about to show you guys was taken in a church over in Ireland. This church houses the national shrine of Saint Oliver Plunkett, who was an Irish saint who was condemned to death. And that was although he was completely innocent. So you're gonna see his cell door and possibly Saint Oliver Plunkett himself. Watch.
This is the door of the cell in Newgate prison, where St. Oliver Plunkett was imprisoned for 8 months.
He's a very interesting figure, because he was...
Okay, no, you're not crazy. I think I saw him as well. So it could be possible that his spirit is still attached to the cell door, or could something more sinister be going on here? Well, you know what? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Jesus is caught moving again, and this takes us to number 2. Seriously, what is up with all these moving Jesus statues? Stop it! I'm really not okay with this, but you guys clicked on this video, so you know what? Here's another scary clip for you. Okay, what did I just watch? This is the reason why I don't go to church. There's too much scariness happening there. I think I'm developing an irrational fear of Jesus statues. I thought church was supposed to be a safe place, but instead of being comforted, I'm being tormented. Dark shadowy figure creeps onto our list at number 1. Well, take a look at this picture right here. It looks like the church might have a demon problem, maybe multiple demons. I don't know what's worse, those termites that we just saw or this devilish demon. And I can't even make out what this thing is. It looks like he has really long arms and legs. Maybe he's a spider demon. Well, whatever he is, I never want to see him in the flesh because I honestly don't think that I would be walking out of that church alive.
Number 10, the Duomo of Florence, Italy. This is one of the coolest places I've ever been, and I had to put it on this list. I've been to Italy once in my life, and this was the highlight of the trip for me, and I did not expect it to be, because I was like, oh, this is a really beautiful church, and then I was like, whoa, living Assassin's Creed, and it was amazing. Besides living out your Assassin's Creed Ezio dreams, not only is the cathedral stunning, but the trip to the top is nothing like you'd expect. I walked in expecting to solely marvel at the frescoes immediately inside, which are breathtaking, but then there was a guy by a small door where you could pay to travel the 463 steps it takes to get to the top. I'm not the one to skip a leg day, so challenge accepted. It wasn't just a spiral staircase, which honestly thank goodness because I would have but anyways, it was that plus scaling steep narrow pathways and traveling through narrow tunnels. Whoever pictured monks as rounded and out of shape was dead wrong, especially if they were climbing that every day. Number 9, the Bronsten Goddess. You would expect statues of the Virgin Mary and Jesus to be present in churchyards and chapels, but this little stone sculpture isn't really as self-explanatory. In the 1920s in Braunston and Rutland, their All Saints Church front steps needed replacing. As they removed the stones, they came across this strange little sculpture. With two noses, a tongue sticking out, protruding breasts and bulging eyes, no one could quite place who or what it was supposed to be. Some believe it's a medieval guardian sculpture to frighten off evil spirits, or some kind of malicious monarch depiction, or even a pagan deity, but the style of carving doesn't match anything previously known, so it could be anything and remains a mystery to this day. Number 8, the Devil's Footprints. Ooh. One night, the devil himself, for whatever reason, tried to steal the bell from the tower of St. Dave's Church in Lanarth. A vicar, however, awoke to the noise and chased the fiend into the graveyard, and the man's foot ignited a fiery footprint on the stone before he left. A similar case befell St. Mary's Churchyard in Newington, Kent, but this time the devil succeeded in stealing the bells. I don't know what it is about the devil and bells, he just loves them, he wants them for himself. The devil leapt from the tower with the bells in a bag and left a fiery footprint on a stone before he left. He accidentally dropped the bells into a stream in his escape, and a local witch said that in order to retrieve them, they'd need 4 pure white cows. When they found the cows seemed to be doing the job until an onlooker was like, look, there's a black dot on one of them, and then the bells went back into the stream because they weren't pure white. But you can actually visit the stone with said footprint atop it, and it is said that if you place a finger on top and walk around it 3 times, it will bring you good luck. Better luck than the devil had, at least. He just couldn't get a handle on those bells. Number 7, St. Catherine of Siena's head. There's gonna be a lot of heads on this list, so get ready for a lot of head puns. Out of all the heads we are going to discuss today, Catherine's looks the best. Like, she's got some kind of secret to the whole like decomposition thing. Like, she looks pretty good. When she was just 7 years old, Catherine had visions that led her to pursue a life in the church with fervor. Her family tried to marry her off, so she cut her hair and scalded her body and ran off to become a nun. When she joined the nunnery, she had a powerful vision of Jesus placing a ring made of his skin, the flesh that was removed during his circumcision, which was revered at the time for some reason, and claimed Catherine in marriage. For the rest of her life, Catherine claimed that she could always see the flesh ring on her finger. Her miracles included levitating during prayer and receiving stigmata, which are holy bodily marks. She died in Rome, but people in Siena, her hometown, wanted a part of her there, so they went to Rome and stole her head. When the guards caught them, they prayed to Catherine, and when the guards looked in the bag, it was entirely filled with rose petals. When the guards left, the head returned, and it is said that that was her final miracle. They also have a piece of her thumb, which isn't mentioned in the story, but I assume that turned into a rose petal as well. Number 6, the tongue and jaw of St. Anthony. Have you ever seen an 800-year-old tongue? Do you want to? Well, you're in luck. Okay, so we've talked about heads being prized, but this church decided to go ahead and covet something else instead. St. Anthony was known for giving terrific and captivating sermons all across Italy and France that seemed to have a unique pull to them. Due to his work in life, Anthony was canonized after his death, but it took 30 years for his body to be exhumed and buried in a new basilica. It It was then that they discovered that his tongue and jaw looked miraculously like it hadn't decomposed a single day. So they buried the rest of his body and put the jaw and tongue in a sacred display case. St. Anthony is the saint of lost things, and people go there to pray to him that they will find what they've lost. Hopefully Anthony doesn't feel like he lost anything when they took his tongue.
Number 6. Diary entry. The following excerpt is from the journal of Wilford Woodruff. The events of the passage took place in October of 1840 in London, England. Having retired to rest in good season, I fell asleep and slept until midnight, when I awoke and meditated upon the things of God until 3 o'clock in the morning, and while forming a determination to warn people in London, and by the assistance and inspiration of God to overcome the power of darkness, a person appeared to me whom I consider was the Prince of Darkness. He made war upon me and attempted to take my life. He caught me by the throat and choked me nearly to death. He wounded me in my forehead. I also wounded him a number of places in the head. As he was about to overcome me, I prayed to the Father in the name of Jesus Christ for help. I then had power over him and he left me, though I was much wounded. Afterwards, 3 persons dressed in white came to me and prayed with me, and I was healed immediately of all my wounds and delivered of all my troubles. Number 5. Daycare haunting. This person said, I work at a sizable Baptist church. We have a very large daycare, and on the ground it was built on used to be a chapel. The stories of sighting something only comes from that side of the building. The storytellers are usually the girls who run the daycare and the cleaning ladies. I personally haven't seen anything weird, but today 3 of the daycare girls talked to me about a young girl who saw something. She was alone in a bathroom connected to a classroom, and the caretaker heard her talking. She came out and the caretaker asked who they were talking to. They said, I was talking to a ghost. Her name is Gigi. And for a few hours after that, the girls were noticing things being moved around and plastic trash bags being shaken. Number 4. Saw ghost in window. This user said, last night my family and I, who ghost hunts frequently, took some other family members that have never ghost hunted out. We went to the Joppa Church in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. We usually catch some potential evidence via photographs, and we sometimes get hits on the EMF reader. Last night while outside, we saw a face that kept distorting and had its own light source. And it was moving as if it was trying to manifest itself, but couldn't quite get there, as we never saw the full face. All light sources on the inside and outside were off, except we had one red headlamp on that. The creepiest part is, while we were in the middle of seeing this, we had all the lights shut off, and my sister started videotaping. And you can hear us in the video, describe what we're seeing, and it did not capture anything. It's driving me nuts and I can't get it out of my mind. 3 of us have been ghost hunting for approximately 15 years, and never in those years have I seen anything like this. Number 3. Nun ghost in church. This online user posted, I was 16 years old and went on a trip with the church choir, and we stayed in an old monastery church. I had health problems, and in the middle of the night I urgently needed our guide, as we called her aunt, and as she slept in a room in another hallway, I had to go down the stairs to another hallway. Suddenly a nun appeared on the stairs and asked me what I was doing here and that I should sleep. I said I needed an aunt because I was not feeling well, and she took me to that room, and all that time she was saying to herself, I have to hurry, I have to be fast. The next morning the priest asked me how I got to my aunt when the doors of those stairs were locked for 50 years because they were in ruins, and he said there was no nun and that the last nun were there almost 100 years ago. I don't know what it was, and to this day I cringe when I think about it. 2. Mysterious crying. This user said, back in around 2001, I was in Dublin, Ireland on a trip. One morning shortly after breakfast, we decided to go to Christ Church Cathedral. We do a tour of the church and just generally walk around. I had a camcorder, and I also used to love my 35mm SLR camera. We are touring the church, and I'm mostly using the camcorder inside the church, but I do take some overall shots inside. Something in the footwalk made me feel really uncomfortable, and my ex was also feeling sick after a while, and she said, let's leave this place. We go on with the rest of our tour in Dublin, then go home. We get home, and a few days after we arrive, some friends come over, and I start to play my camcorder, recording shots of Dublin. When the part inside the Christ Church comes up, one of our friends asks, who's that crying? I didn't hear it, and we rewound the tape and put the volume up loud, and we could hear someone crying, like a moaning type crying. The thing is following us around for most of the video, and the next day we took my 35mm mm film to get developed, and in 4 photos you can see a smoke swirl like one coming off a wall and another hanging overhead. Then in the photos of the footpath there are flames on the corner of the wall. And coming in at number 1 is The Job. This user said, several years ago I had an opportunity to help restore a 100-year-old church. During the days I would work, I'd always see movement in my peripheral vision, but nothing that was there when I'd look in that direction. Well, after business hours one evening, I got a call from a tenant saying that something was making noise in the basement of the church. As soon as I got to the basement door, I could hear what sounded like a power tool running. I find the cause of the noise, which was an air compressor that was unplugged. At this moment, my brand new flashlight started to flicker and another unplugged power tool took turns behind me. I ran out of the basement and got out and saw the tenant standing at the door. I tell her what happened and she smirks and says that doesn't surprise her. She then tells me a story of a woman who held the last wedding in the church before it closed down. She was stood up on her wedding day and ended her life because of it. Now, after that night in the basement, the paranormal activity happened more and more often. It got to a point where a coworker fell off a ladder. When I asked what happened, he said he felt like he was pushed while leaning to paint. There were even times where the movement I had always seen in there started to take shape. Instead of a blur, I started seeing a person standing there, but nothing when I looked in that direction. One night, as I'm locking the doors, I hear faint footsteps in the balcony, and I yell out, "Is anyone still in here?" I didn't get an answer, but at this point, I'm ready to go. As I reach for the door, I hear footsteps behind me and a muffled voice say, "Leave." As I'm locking the door, I see movement inside the church. I look up and see a ghostly or shadow-like figure standing where the altar once was. After that night, I made sure that I never entered that building after dark again. Needless to say, I quit shortly thereafter, and yeah, I don't blame him.